Hey everybody, today we're going to take an updated look at the favorability ratings for all 50 US state governors. So this is from Morning Consult. They usually do this every quarter, and this most recent one was from July 24th. It is fairly recent, so we're going to go through this entire summary and see what they have to say. And one quick channel note before we get started. Now there is an option to join down below. I thought the other day I had it all set. It should be good to go now. The main benefit right now is just to show your support. We're going to take it slow and see what happens. There's new things we could try, different things we can add over time. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. But joining the channel would be extra special. Right now, I'd make sure to put your name below for the next week's worth of videos. So anyway, let's get back to the governors. Let's see who's hot, who's not. So maybe you're not a fan of Morning Consult or Consult, however you want to say it. And it's always good to have multiple sources, but they do take a comprehensive look at all 50 governors. It's all in one page, and I think there's some good information here. So let's see what the key takeaways are this time. First, along with receiving solid marks from Kentucky Democrats and Independents, Governor Andy Beshear wins approval from roughly half of the state's Republicans, making him the country's most popular Democratic governor with the other party's voters. Of course, Beshear, going into an election season, he's looking to maintain popularity. Looks like he may have even expanded it. It's a great sign for the Democrats and a very ominous sign for the Republicans. The next point is, despite President Joe Biden's unpopularity in the bluegrass state, half of Kentucky voters who disapprove of his job performance approve of Beshear's. And despite Donald Trump's double-digit 2020 victory there, those who voted for the former president are nearly as likely to approve of Beshear as they are to disapprove. Of course, we're going to look at that Kentucky race more in depth as time goes on, but it is now even more of an uphill climb for the Republicans. Now, approval ratings are not everything. The Republican nominee for governor, Daniel Cameron, he's looking to make it competitive, but he's got to be nervous about seeing these numbers. Now, one of the other races for governor this fall is in Mississippi. This says over 3 in 5 black voters disapprove of Governor Tate Reeves' job performance, including 50% who strongly disapprove. The latter figure is up 16 points over the past 2 years, suggesting heightened energy against the incumbent Republican among black people who make up more than a third of Mississippi's population. So like Kentucky, Mississippi is a red state. Tate Reeves doesn't necessarily have to get a lot of Democrats or black voters, but if he's going to overwhelmingly lose them, then he's going to have to rely much more on his base. Could make it much more challenging for him to win and provide an opening for his opponent, Democrat Brandon Presley. And down here, this is probably a surprise to nobody. For the third quarter in a row, Phil Scott is America's most popular governor, receiving positive marks from 76% of his state's voters compared with 22% who disapprove. Super blue state, Phil Scott, the liberal Republican, maintains his dominance atop the popularity charts. So we've got a little bit more here about Andy Beshear and Tate Reeves, two key governor's elections coming up in just a few months. Here's some breakdown for Beshear's approval. Overall, he's sitting at 64%, only 32% disapprove. With Democrats, it's at 90-7 split. Independents, he's at 59-32. And even with Republicans, he's at about an even split, 49 approve, 48 disapprove. So it's a red state in almost every way. But what I always say is, at the top of the ticket for governor, state politics are different than national politics. Sometimes voters do want a little bit of balance. The legislature there is overwhelmingly Republican. There's a lot of vetoes, veto overrides. Sometimes it doesn't work, and voters want a governor that's not going to keep getting in the way of the legislator. But other times, including this one, having a governor in office like Beshear, who's regarded as more of a moderate, could be viewed as a little bit of a check on the state legislator. But again, there's a supermajority. They could do whatever they want, unless the Democrats are able to cut into that in the upcoming election. This next section, you can pause it here if you'd like, but this just showcases the voters that disapprove of Joe Biden while still approving of Andy Beshear. There is a lot of crossover. Democrats will need a lot of crossover support to hold that seat. Right now they're getting it. It's not a guarantee they're going to win, but again, it's a solid sign if you're Beshear. Now down here, let's look at Tate Reeves. He's sitting at a 48% approval, 42 disapprove. He's massively underwater with Democrats, 71-19. Independents, it's an even split, 40-40. With Republicans, that's his base. He's only at 76-18. Compared to Beshear, those are lower numbers. He should be getting a higher share of his own party. Down here, here's another section. Black Mississippians' disapproval of Reeves has intensified since 2021. You can see quarter 2 for 21, 22, and 23. For all voters, his approval has dropped off a little bit. For black voters, it's also dropped a little bit, but the strongly disapprove has gone up considerably. And with white voters, there's mostly a negligible dip, but it's similar to where he was 2 years ago. So down here, it's the full list, all 50 governors and their approval ratings. Let's see what we've got. Of course, we already know it's Phil Scott, but But who's the runner-up? We've got Mark Gordon in Wyoming. He's at a very substantial 69% approval rating, only 19% disapprove. That's actually the lowest disapproval rating, even lower than Phil Scott. Third place, we've got Josh Green. And it seems like Green has turned things around in Hawaii as far as approval of the governor. I remember David Ige, he was down at the bottom of these, so whatever Green is doing looks like it's working so far in Hawaii. In fourth place, we've got a familiar name. It's Chris Sununu. He's also at 64. Then we've got Andy Beshear, Kristi Noem, Mike Dunleavy, Kay Ivey, Ned Lamont in Connecticut, and Jim Justice in West Virginia rounds out the top 10. So then we've got the middle of the pack, but pretty much all these governors are at least in the low 50s for approval rating. Some of them do start to get into the 40s with a disapproval. Some of these governors are up for re-election next year. Some of them are going to be retiring. So you can take a look at this, find your governor. You can take a look at the newest governors like Wes Moore in Maryland. He's at 58% to 22. Joe Lombardo is at 57 to 26. But you probably want to know who's down at the bottom. Well, at the very bottom, it's also a familiar name. It's Tina Kotek of Oregon. She's the least liked, but also still has a positive favorability rating. 45 approve, 39 disapprove. So Kotek is doing similar to her predecessor, Kate Brown. It's a fairly blue state, but she's unable to navigate the waters there and win over support from a majority of the voters. Now, right behind Kotek is Katie Hobbs in Arizona, 47 to 40. Right behind her is Tate Reeves. Then fourth up, we have Tony Evers in Wisconsin. Then it's Jay Inslee in Washington, Kevin Stitt in Oklahoma, Kathy Hochul, Mike Parson, Jim Pillen, and Michelle Lujan Grisham. Those round out the bottom 10. So there's some summary of that chart here if you want to take a look at that. But finally at the bottom, this talks about Ron DeSantis' approval and how it slipped since he got into the race for president. In the first quarter, he was at 56 to 38. This quarter, he's at 54 to 42. That is a slight drop, but it's actually fairly insignificant. Amongst Republicans, he's dropped 4%. I've seen some other polls that show a much sharper drop, but in this poll, I'd say it's a fairly negligible drop. And finally, we have everybody's favorite. It's DB, Doug Burgum from North Dakota. His approval rating since he got into the race, it's pretty much the same. It was previously 56-26. His approval ticked up 1 point. Disapproval dropped 4. There's a good chunk of voters that don't know or have no opinion. I would guess one of the variables is Doug Burgum is not nearly in the limelight as much as Ron DeSantis. He's not nearly viewed as controversial, and he's from a state that does not have as much prominence as some other states, especially Florida, and people aren't really coming out to attack Burgum. It's either got to be because they just don't view him as much of a threat, or he might just be so much of a crowd pleaser. You can decide which one it is. So that is a recap of the quarterly Morning Consult Governor's approval ratings. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about anything in this article? Andy Beshear, Tate Reeves, Ron DeSantis, Doug Burgum, or the full list of the 50 governors? How does your governor rank? Who are you most surprised by? Let me know down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video.